In this video, I'm going to explain how obesity increases coronavirus severity. In actual fact, obesity increases the severity of, or can increase the severity of any viral infection. So we're going to go through that information in this video, and hopefully it will motivate people to get a handle on their obesity situation. So this is a paper. You can read the title. This is the conclusion. You can see down below. Increased risk of being hospitalized in adult participants that are underweight, which means that their body mass index is below 18.5, or if they are morbidly obese, which is a body mass index of 40 or higher. And you'll be surprised at how many people are actually morbidly obese and they just think they're regularly obese. And because that's a BMI over 30 is considered obese. But people can not look obese depending upon their height and how they carry their weight. So being morbidly obese is not that uncommon by any stretch. Another paper that talks about, you can read the title yourself, just showing you that there is a lot of work on this out there. This is from the American Academy of Family Physicians. You can see, published in 2018, a 2018 study. New study ties obesity to increased risk of flu transmission. This is what we are told. You can see where it was published, and I'll show you this paper in a couple of seconds. Journal of Infectious Disease. Those who are obese and infected with certain flu strains may remain contagious for considerably longer periods of time than patients with the flu who are not obese, thereby likely increasing the risk of spreading the virus to others. So, being obese is a health risk not only for you, but for your fellow humans. This is a paper that also cited the same paper that the AAFP cited, Obesity and Influenza Shedding. Obesity, why did I put this up here? Is because obesity leads to chronic inflammation, which could alter influenza transmission potential. We're going to talk about how obesity and the flu, the biochemistry, are very similar. This is the paper that they're talking about from the Journal of Infectious Disease. Obesity increases the duration of influenza A virus shedding in adults. Okay, so just about a week ago, I put this video up, how to protect yourself against the deadly coronavirus. So I went over protection, what deadly actually means, and looking at the coronavirus itself. And in that video, I talk about the cytokine storm. And you can see this is from Business Times, so the average person should appreciate this. A cytokine storm is an excess of pro-inflammatory proteins being released by immune cells due to the presence of the coronavirus, as well as flu and other viruses. So this cytokine storm is not something new. You can see it back in 2012, and we're going to talk about it because when you see the biochemistry of the storm, you'll see that it resembles the biochemistry of obesity. So this is the image that this paper, in the eye of the cytokine storm, showed us this. These are all abbreviations for cytokines. Interleukin is what IL means. Interleukin 1, interleukin 2, interleukin 6, and there are others like tumor necrosis factors. So these are the cytokines that become elevated. And in that video that I did a week ago, I went over this image, which you should watch the video to understand, so I'm not going to go over it again. The point, though, is that pigging out on pro-inflammatory calories, missing sleep, sedentary living, mental, emotional stressors flames you up, and then you throw the coronavirus in there and you get an elevation of pro-inflammatory cytokines. I'm highlighting interleukin 6 because a study out of China talked about interleukin 6, and it's easier for the average person who doesn't appreciate what cytokines are to just look at one. So interleukin 6, a pro-inflammatory cytokine. So let's look at what happens when we compare lean, deflamed adipose tissue to obese, pro-inflammatory, inflamed adipose tissue. So adipocytes, so cyte means cell. So adipo means fat, so this is a fat cell. We all have fat cells, and we should have lean fat mass, not obese fat mass, because lean fat mass has anti-inflammatory immune cells associated with it. So a lean adipocyte, a lean fat cell, pumps out proper amounts of anti-inflammatory adiponectin and potentially pro-inflammatory leptin, so we want that. M2 macrophages, you see here, anti-inflammatory. T helper 2 cells, anti-inflammatory. And T regulatory cells, anti-inflammatory. So you have lymphocytes, the T cells, and you have macrophages, two different immune cell types. Both are of the anti-inflammatory subtype, and this leads to a proper release of anti-inflammatory interleukin 10, which combats pro-inflammatory cytokines. So what happens when we pig out? Well, the average American pigs out on too much sugar, flour, and refined oils. We get it almost, shockingly, the average American, who of course is overweight or obese, gets almost 60% of their calories from these completely empty calorie sources. All we're getting is sugar, flour, and oil. No nutrients. So what happens? Well, fat cells start to swell. That's why I call them all, obese and inflamed. You'll see what it looks like. Here they are. So you can see this yellow is to reflect an accumulation of fat. Now, what people don't realize, now, most of the fat that we store is actually saturated. Now, the thing about this is not the way you think about eating saturated fat. It's the fact that overeating sugar and flour, these extra calories that become glucose get converted by our body into saturated fats, which get stored in obese fat cells. Now, over time, these obese, crowded fat cells, they become necrotic, and that is what this is. And you'll see the word necrosis or necrotic appearing shortly. So what is the difference between the lean, deflamed adipose compared to obese, inflamed adipose tissue? Well, first and foremost, it's obvious to see that the fat cells are very different. The obese fat cells are packed full of stored fat because of overeating sugar, flour, calories primarily, and also the oil calories. So when you look at deflamed M2 macrophages, obese adipose tissue has no or minimal deflamed M2s. It is loaded with pro-inflammatory M1s. Now, pro-inflammatory M1s show up anywhere to engulf dead human body components after injury or bacterial viral components. And so we also get a replacement of the anti-inflammatory T helper 2 cells with T helper 1s. We also get T helper 17 cells. You can see that M1s, T helper 1s, and Th17 cells don't exist over here, only in obese adipose tissue. We also get an infiltration of natural killer cells, and we get an infiltration of cytotoxic T cells. So we're going to focus on these two guys right here. You can put these guys into a Google search field, which is what I did here. Just put in natural killer cells. When do they show up? When viral infections are present, and cancer, but we're focusing on viral infections. So natural killer cells show up when there's virally infected cells. What about cytotoxic T cells? Throw them in there. Cytotoxic T cells show up. This is just Wikipedia, but this is really, really well known. When do cytotoxic T cells? Well, when cells are infected, particularly with viruses. So you can look further. This is Science Direct, which is a source for scientific articles. And what are we told there? Cytotoxic T cells destroy viral infected cells. Well, the human body, the human immune system perceives all this excess calories, or stored calories, as essentially being infected with calories. Now, you don't get a fever or anything, but you can certainly feel unwell, just like people feel unwell with a low-grade viral infection. So basically, obesity is a low-grade calorie infection state that resembles a low-grade viral infected state. So this is showing what happens when the immune system needs to get rid of a dead, dying, unhealthy, obese fat cell. It gets swarmed with pro-inflammatory macrophages. Now we compare the two images, and look what you see. It's just awful. So not everybody who's just obese. If your BMI goes above 30, you're considered to be obese. And then when you go above 35, 40, after you pass 40, that's morbid obesity. People can enter this pro-inflammatory immune state with obesity at any one of those levels, depending upon who you are. And you'd know most easily by looking at C-reactive protein levels. So CRP tells you the prevailing state of flame, and CRP, which hopefully you've heard of, really high sensitivity CRP is the one to test for, it gets pumped up due to increased production of interleukin-6, which I mentioned before. So what is the outcome of this obese, inflamed adipose tissue mass? Well, obese fat cells produce high levels of pro-inflammatory leptin in this case, low levels of anti-inflammatory adiponectin. And then we get replacement of M2 macrophages that are anti-inflammatory with M1s that are pro-inflammatory. We lose helper 2s and lean adipose tissue mass. We get replacement with helper 1s, T helper 1s that are pro-inflammatory. We get infiltration of T helper 17s that are pro-inflammatory, and we get infiltration of the adipose tissue mass with cytotoxic and natural killer cells, all of which are pro-inflammatory, and they pump out this inflammatory chemistry. Here are all the different pro-inflammatory cytokines that are pumped out. There's more, but this is what I put here. And here is interleukin-6, which I highlighted just because that coronavirus study in China highlighted on interleukin-6. And it's easier to focus on one thing versus many things. So when you look at somebody who is in this state, we can clearly see that they are living in a virus-like infected state even before any infectious agent rolls in. So it should not be a surprise. Essentially, the obese pro-inflammatory state is a pre-flame state that will augment the flame created by viral infection, which is why there is greater severity. Now, what else goes on with people who are obese like this? Well, they overeat sugar, they overeat flour, and most of them are either pre-diabetic or diabetic, and that means that they got elevated blood glucose levels on top of the obesity. And how bad is that? Well, let's look. Influenza virus and glycemic variability in diabetes, a killer combination? Yeah, so hyperglycemia and obesity both are a pre-flame state that will augment the presence of a viral infection. In this study here, they talked about the coronavirus as well. So obese, underweight individuals are much more likely at risk for being hospitalized with a viral infection because they are pre-flamed. So to get more information about this, you can check out my previous video about the coronavirus and viruses in general. And to understand chronic inflammation better, you can watch this video, Chronic Inflammation, How to Understand It Properly. And in that video, I created this image to demonstrate how chronic inflammation is cumulative in nature. And in this video, I discussed obesity, and I discussed a pro-inflammatory diet loaded with sugar and refined oils. You can see the other pro-inflammatory factors that you need to address and handle to make yourself or your patients most resilient to any bacterial, viral infection or other stressor that can compromise the human body. To get more information, if you wish, about the nature of chronic inflammation and understand the dietary components, this is my most recent book. And I use the term rotting because people do not really realize that osteoarthritis, osteoporosis are osteoarthritis, chronic joint pain, osteoporosis, thinning of bone, loss of bone mass are basically biological rotting states. And so this fat mass image that I showed you, I created for this book and this book. And then all the anti-inflammatory aspects of diet that I'm aware of, or at least back by the time, for the lion's share is there. And of course, the topic of this video, getting rid of obesity, this book is very helpful. So you can find these at dflame.com. You can follow me on Facebook, link right there, YouTube right there, like and follow all that stuff that people talk about. And if you want to get volumes of these books to provide to patients, friends, family, you can do it that way, or get single copies as well through dflame.com.